Hello and welcome to the State of Events, where event professionals connect.
Thank you again, everybody, for being here. We did a little intro. We found that there's some people here that are not that are new to the cannabis event industry, and then we have some people that are seasoned with the cannabis event industry. I'm Vanessa, CEO and producer of Infinitely Elevated, and this is Cannetalk. We have decided to discuss the impact of cannabis as it stands for event professionals and consumers. So today we have our collaborative team for State of the Events, and I'm going to let them briefly introduce themselves. Sonia Collier, owner of Essential Events, and also our main producer for the State of the Events podcast. Sonia.
Hey, how you guys doing? I'm from Essential Events and creator of the podcast, the State of Events that we have, and looking forward to Cannetalk. It's going to be great.
All right, and then we also have our lovely Zoe Moore, who focuses a lot on inclusion and diversity for amazing companies. If ever you need somebody who can help to guide the structure of your company, especially as it comes to inclusion and diversity, Zoe is the one. But I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. Yeah, Zoe Moore. My real name is Sharita, but that's another story. I do the admin here for the State of the Events, collaborating with my longtime and best friend, sister, friend, all that good stuff, and Vanessa. We have worked together on many other projects, so I'm just really proud for the opportunity to use the event space to talk about everything, especially cannabis, both in my personal life and professional life. So looking forward to learning and just connecting with all of you.
And now we are going to introduce some amazing guests of honor who, again, these ladies have been phenomenal in what they've been doing for the cannabis industry, not just in cannabis, but for women in general. These women are so powerful, and I'm so humbled and excited to be here with them today. We have Jennifer of Lady Jane Branding. Jennifer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me. So I am the founder of Lady Jane Branding and of the Women in Cannabis Study. I got into the industry about a year and a half ago. I started Lady Jane Branding, and I do brand identity and brand strategy work for cannabis and CBD and hemp companies. The women study of women's experiences working in the cannabis industry, and I have over 950 responses from women in 3 countries for a survey that's about 100 questions. So it's yielded some very interesting insights about women who work in the cannabis industry. And I'm at the point where I'm getting ready to get all of the data analyzed so that we can report on it. But what we're finding is that, equity is an issue in the industry. But we've got a lot of work to do. So let's see how it goes.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, and then our next speaker, we actually have Jocelyn of Angel Fire International. Jocelyn, she introduced herself beforehand, but I'm going to let her do it again. Jocelyn, nice to have you on board.
So excited to be here. Angel Fire, I guess I should say a little bit about what Angel Fire is. I don't think I really touched on that before, but it's basically an advocacy platform where we're advocating for the plant, and also we do host events that, have purpose. A lot of the events that I have done have created networks after, which is pretty much the point of hosting an event, is so that people can actually interface and learn and, really develop those avenues that might not have been there prior to, going to a networking event. So Angel Fire really thrives on that. And we're big on like the whole inclusion thing, and just showing our community really how wealthy the plant is, like so many things that you can do from it. I've worked with companies that are dealing with the whole hempcrete thing, and that is like mind blowing. I know that like it's just so many innovative ideas and opportunities that are in cannabis. So I'm just excited. I'm excited for where it's going to be. I'm happy to be a part and just, hear everyone speak today.
Rock on. Awesome. So we are going to just go ahead and get right into it with our first question. And Jocelyn and Jennifer, please feel free to just kind of hop in and answer these questions. But actually, I think, Jennifer, I'm going to focus this on you first. Because I believe when we spoke last, you had this amazing story as to the impact cannabis had on your life and how it essentially brought you into the space. I would love for you just to share that story and let us know, what does cannabis mean to you and how has it impacted your life?
Sure. Well, I spent a lot of years unwell with an autoimmune disease and an immune disorder. And it was in 2017 that I moved to Maine to get a new job, but also I got my medical card the first day that I arrived. I was living in the Midwest. I was hoping to use cannabis to help resolve the symptoms from those medical issues. And it took a while. And then I had a really bad year in 2018. I lost the job that I'd moved to Maine for. I had to move my mom to town to care for her, and she was difficult. Got divorced, got into a car accident, and then I had PTSD, and I was really struggling. And I spent a lot of time at my caregiver's house. At the time, Maine was still really just medical, and there were no retail stores. You actually, you either got delivery from your caregiver or you hung out at their house. And I hung out at his house. And I met a lot of other entrepreneurs, a lot of patients, a lot of, there were a lot of people who were able to help me get through my issues. So between cannabis and therapy and brain retraining, I was able to resolve the symptoms of all of the disorders that I was dealing with. I managed to get off of all the medications that I was taking for those disorders, which was interesting because the medications didn't really work because the issues were in my brain. And so between the brain retraining and the cannabis, I was able to heal the trauma, which healed all of the symptoms. And the way that cannabis helps me with that is that it allows me to process the trauma and the difficult stuff. I cried for 2 years straight. And then I got better. And so now when I deal with trauma, which is happening now, there's the apocalypse that's going on. And it's active trauma. And I have to remember that it's okay to go through that. That's what's happening in the world. And, when you're getting better from PTSD, you're having to tell your brain, everything's okay. When things aren't actually okay, it's hard to get through that. But cannabis allows me to feel what's going on and process it instead of swallow it. And when I used to swallow things, they ate me from the inside out. And so now I've built the resilience and the ability to get up each time. I feel the trauma, I process it, I cry, it hurts, it's hard, and then I get up and I keep going. And I couldn't do that before I found the type of cannabis that could help me. So.
That's amazing, Jennifer. And so as far as the cannabis goes, is it CBD, is it THC, do you use a blend? How do you determine?
It's mostly THC. I use CBD on occasion. I have a few higher CBD flower cultivars that I like to use. But I smoke flower. I do so every 2 to 4 hours, depending on how I'm feeling that day. When the trauma's bad, when the symptoms are bad, it's more. And it gets to be more as the day goes on. And now I can sleep through the night and wake up and be all right. So on occasion, edibles when things are really bad, but it's mostly just flour.
Okay. So, Jocelyn, I'm going to move to you and ask you the same question. How did you get into the industry? What is the impact cannabis has had on your life?
Okay, so I got into the industry pretty much through just experiences. My grandmother, she actually passed away with dementia, and that was like my first time really looking at how pharmaceutical medication can sometimes adversely affect the body over an extended period of time. So I didn't really use cannabis as much prior to this experience, but I knew that there had to be a better way. There had to be a better way to deal with, like personally, I have fibroids, which have brought on a lot of pain and issues dealing with that. So I found that that was another thing. Cannabis helped extremely. It helped so much that even everything that the doctor gave me didn't compare. Sorry. So I just saw how it worked, and it inspired me to learn more about it. And I was actually dating a cop at the time who he really didn't mind the cannabis usage. He just really encouraged me to look at it from a scientific standpoint, like to learn about it and not just smoke it. And so realizing and lining up how the medicinal purpose has always been there. And that's what I always tell people, like, even if you don't realize it, cannabis definitely is helping you in some way, shape, or form. A lot of people are dealing with anxiety and depression and like all these things that we internalize and don't really deal with. We kind of just say, oh, I'm just stressed. No, you might be a little anxious. You might be dealing with some things, and this could help. You don't necessarily have to go off the deep end and use an antidepressant or anything that could, cause you to alter yourself. And that's what I found too, just speaking with different people who are that use cannabis. They were saying the same things. Like, I prefer the natural method. I like that it allows me to, still be creative. It allows me still to interact with my family and my friends. Sometimes it even creates more of a social element for some people, interacting with people as they use the cannabis. So for me personally, I consume more THC, just to be completely honest. And I'm getting more into CBD because I do see the benefits of it. When I was talking about crampiness and then also like dealing with postpartum, I didn't deal too much with postpartum depression. I dealt more with postpartum anxiety, which was new to me. I didn't even know that was a thing, right? So I just found that using small amounts was better for me. I found that out as I got older, that, that's a misconception that, everyone's stoned out. That's not true. A lot of people use cannabis just for, to do whatever they need it to do. They don't overuse it or abuse it, which I think is where I'm excited that cannabis is headed due to, how everything is. There's a lot more education that's taking place. So that's like the upside of, the forward progression or whatnot. But for me, I'm a THC girl all the way. But I'm definitely learning more and, trying to understand the best way, microdosing. I recommend that for a lot of people, especially if you're, and speak with the doctor. That's the other thing. A lot of people are scared to talk to doctors about this. And I feel like there are doctors out there that are privy to this whole thing. So I would definitely say if you're new to cannabis, definitely start with CBD and then, just see what works for you. Everything that works for me might not work for you. So.
Absolutely. And between you both, do you guys feel like the stigma of cannabis, are you seeing it change from what cannabis was like, say, even like 5 years ago?
Definitely.
I would say so. There's still plenty of work to do, plenty of room to change minds. But yeah, I would say that there's definitely been movement.
Yeah. And how impactful do you think events and social education has been on producing better results for people understanding cannabis comprehensively?
You know, for the events that I've been to where there have been people who are not in the industry already, you know, I think particularly for B2B events, you know, for people looking to get into the industry, it shows that, you know, it's just another business. It's another industry that works like any other, or it will work like any other at some point. And so I think that is helpful, you know, bringing business professionals into the industry as, I think is a way to get people in without necessarily making them try it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
You know, so they can surround themselves with the culture and the industry first, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. The education. Absolutely. One of the things with Infinitely Elevated that we enjoy is that we make the events so that you don't necessarily have to be a consumer or you have to consume when you come on site. You can totally enjoy these experiences without touching cannabis at all, but at least the education is still there. Because again, Jennifer, like you were saying, you don't want to push people in an area that they're not entirely comfortable, but once they have that level of comfort, then they're more inclined to do it. So it's very interesting that you say that. And speaking,
Vanessa, we have a question in the chat group for the ladies on from MP Good. Would you like to ask the question?
you can go ahead, Zoe.
Okay, so the question is, I've been told that CBD has an odd taste when you cook with it. If someone can discuss the food and beverage side of events, that would be great.
It does leave an aftertaste,
Yeah.
depending on, although I'll tell you, I saw a product at MJ BizCon that was designed to take that aftertaste away. So yes, there is one. They're working on it.
Do you know the name of that product, Jennifer?
I don't recall, because I just walked past and tried a sample of with and without, and there was definitely a difference. But no, I'm sorry, I don't recall what that was. What was the second part about food and beverage at events?
Yes, a lot of go right ahead. There you go.
Hi. Yeah, more so wanted to kind of understand more about the cocktails and the dosage of things. Like I've said earlier, I've been watching a lot of the episodes of Cooking with Cannabis that Khalees has on Netflix. And I have a friend here that's kind of starting a business more with CBD oils, and she wants to have education classes, but also receptions for people. So I reached out to one of my friends that's a vegan chef. And I said, well, do you do any type of cannabis event? She's like, oh, we still kind of figuring out the cooking portion of it and the dosages and how it works. And then I was also interested in if maybe we couldn't do, they haven't figured that out yet, doing maybe just cocktails at the event with regular like appetizers and desserts.
So here would be my, if you don't mind if I answer that one. My recommendation would be for if you're doing food and beverage with cannabis and with THC, low dosage so that people can layer. And because if people don't know their dosage, they really need to start really small. For those that do know and have much higher tolerances, it's helpful to offer something for those people to, you know, raise their the THC level. It's also helpful to have food options that are only CBD or don't have the THC, if you want to eat more and you don't want to have THC, I would not recommend cocktails with alcohol. I don't think that's a good mix at all.
And
Can I second that? Just in my experience, alcohol and cannabis kind of doesn't mix. And you'll actually find that a lot of people that consume cannabis on a regular basis, they're not much of drinkers. Like even wine, they're not interested that much in that. They might consume socially, but I don't think alcohol and cannabis mix that much. Now, if it's solely like that's it, like you're gonna just do like small infusions in your drinks or something like that, if that's acceptable, maybe. But I would kind of steer away from that because it kind of makes you feel sick.
Okay, that's
You
good.
turn green.
And to add on to that too, another thing with THC already has a CBD component in it. And so one of the ways to really help people if they do start experiencing feeling that they're getting a little too high because they haven't necessarily microdosed, if you offer more CBD, it will start counteracting the THC component of it. And so that is a way, from my understanding, to help sort of alleviate the experience of getting too high.
That can work, but it doesn't always work. There is a product though called Undo. It's spelled UNDOO, and I think it's an enzyme. And if you're doing events where people are using THC and maybe don't know their dosage, it is a good product to have on hand because you take it, drink a glass of water, and go to bed, and it undoes it. So it's actually another way to take a tolerance break. Tolerance break takes at least 48 hours. This you can do it overnight.
Another suggestion I've always heard, at least when it comes to food, is when you want to offer people the experience of sort of having more control over their food, is to use it more so in the sauces, things that they can either add or not add. It's, salad dressings, butters, things that, they have an option of putting onto their food.
If I also can just jump in here, I also am a CBD user for a wellness plan treating rheumatoid arthritis. And I've noticed that just for my preference, I separate my CBD and my THC. I do not mix them, primarily because my CBD intake is on a supplemental basis. So I take it in the morning and at night. And then at night, however, I implement a THC only item to bring up the ratio a little bit closer to that CBD. So for instance, one of the products that I use is by an amazing dispensary called Cornerstone Research Collective. And they're actually a group of researchers who are doing constant research around around cannabis. And they make a product that I take, like I said, the supplement. Their particular ratio is 22 to 1, which is 22 cannabinoids to 1 portion. I don't even know necessarily what the name for that is, but 1 THC. However, at night, because I implement more THC to support better sleeping for myself, particularly if I have a flare-up, what I'll end up doing is I keep that 22 to 1 ratio item and I implement more THC to bring up that number so that I can get to a better state of needing to support my sleeping. However, when it comes to taking the CBD, I absolutely do separate that so that I can, number one, I can dose appropriately for the THC. And also I can just decide if I want to implement that THC. If I'm taking a CBD product that has THC in it, I can then no longer extract that THC and say, I don't want that effect, right? And so for the purposes of having an event where you're having food and beverage, my suggestion would be to separate those items unless you're having someone there who is providing a product in which they're very, very clear on the different ratios of the CBD to THC item that they're providing for that event.
Awesome. Thank you, Sonia. Did anybody else have anything that they wanted to add in regards to the food and beverage component?
I can tell you a funny little thing that I saw at an event, a 420 event, where we were served lobster rolls with 50 and 100 milligram butter sauce. It was delicious. But they made, this woman made meat pipes. They were little meatloaves this big with a hole in it and a hole in the top. And she put cannabis in it and you could smoke it. It was hilarious.
That is amazing. That right there is sort of like an interactive gourmet experience, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. Speaking of which, so cannabis events and the types of cannabis events that you've been to. I know there's so many different kinds, and I know that's sort of like a loaded question. Jocelyn, can you tell us some of the types of cannabis events that you've been to, and if you notice, one, the different types of participants, if you saw that there were consumers there that were not familiar with cannabis, like what were the demographics like? And then two, what was the impact on the participants that you saw with them being at the cannabis event?
Okay, so I've been to your lower scale events, and I've been to some really classy cannabis events. And what I would say from like the smaller events, like people that were kind of starting out, was, you have to always consider the environment in which you're in. And when you're dealing with cannabis, especially if people are smoking the cannabis, you want to make sure that like ventilation and like all of those things are thought out like well in advance, and make sure that the venue that you're hosting is, well suited for what you're trying to do. But what I will say is, those events, I like the fact that they were cultural, like you felt the whole cultural cannabis experience, but I don't feel that they really were as educational as the events that I have been to that were a little bit more on the upper scale of things. And I feel that when it deals with cannabis, people automatically think like, oh, Stonerville's gonna have, smoke and lights and like it's gonna be super vibey, and like that's cool. I do like that piece, but a lot of the events that are centered around like purpose are the kind of events that I feel are more impacting. Whether it like even if it's like an event that is dealing with I don't know, like a lot of people are asking about food, just making sure that you are providing people like resources and things like that. So I think that those types of events where people are actually being educated are more impacting for the people that come. But if you're looking for like an experience, I'm still down for those. But I just hope that things get, especially here in DC, where when you hear cannabis events, it's not necessarily a good thing. A lot of the events here are shut down due to like regulations and like things like that. So when I spend a lot of time like on the West Coast or in other where cannabis is definitely much more mature, I witnessed, events on a whole nother scale. I've been to an event that looked like, you had literally like different devices set up. Like there was this company, it kind of reminded me of like an Apple type situation where people could actually enjoy the experience. They're being educated on it. If it's your first time, it's not like super scary. No one's pushing you to do it. It's more of like a, I don't know. It was just a different experience. So I think those style of events are definitely the wave and where cannabis is going. It does take resources to put on those kinds of events. So that's why I'm so thankful for like this whole platform, because you're giving people resources and you're letting people know a lot of knowledge ahead of time so they don't have to kind of figure it out like a lot of people have done. But I think cannabis events are super, especially if you're doing it for like a company. who's trying to build their brand, you know, bring more awareness to their company, events are like pretty much a no-brainer. Most people like to throw them. I've actually been consulted to have, and I helped out with a company that throws events, kind of like a monthly type thing. So I would always come and help them. And I mean, I've met grandmas at these events. I mean, the demographic is pretty spread out. Like you can meet anybody. That's what I like about cannabis. You might try to gear it towards a certain target market, but anyone could be at the event. Like I literally met a refugee at one of the events, like literally a Puerto Rican refugee grandma who was interested in starting her own cannabis business. And so we were able to talk a little bit more about that. So cannabis is universal.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that one of the big things about cannabis events is that as much fun as we have doing them, we can't be naive to think that they're actually easy to put on. Again, cannabis is so regulated, especially when it comes to the event industry. And there's so many policies to have to navigate. Can either of you or even anybody else in the chat speak to maybe some of the policies or the legislations that, or issues that you came across understanding how putting on an event in the cannabis industry compared to, you know, something that you wouldn't have had to face in a traditional event? I know for me personally, when it comes to weddings or honestly any sort of events, insurance is a big issue that people have to deal with. If you've ever tried to get insurance for a cannabis company, for a cannabis event, it's probably about like 5 times the cost of just, you know, a traditional, whatever that traditional event is. At least that's what it's been for us. And the questions that they ask you as far as in order to get insurance, you know, is there water close by? Every little thing that they feel, you know, is there an animal on site? Of course, obviously, if you have alcohol, it's a big no-no. They ask so many questions as far as whether or not you can be able to even do cannabis on site. And so it makes it very difficult to even get past the insurance process, which I think is why it's so hard to get a lot of these events even out the door. Any other things that you guys can
who's the primary resource? Like I know like you mentioned alcohol at an event, and so we know where to go to get those permits. Is it the same ABC office for cannabis?
No, so ABC, they are one that you can talk to. They actually already have the Cannabis Bureau. You can almost contact any insurance company and ask them. They're all kind of set up now to have some sort of cannabis focus. I mean, a lot of these insurance companies see that there is money in cannabis. So they do have a sector cut out for cannabis. I believe you have Event Helper, which is a really easy one to go and get cannabis insurance from, because you can just go online, put in your information to get a quote. They contact you in 24 hours. If you do insert cannabis, obviously they are going to have to contact you. They're not going to give you a quote right away. But traditionally, almost all the insurance companies do that. The minute that you put cannabis on there, they're like, okay, well, we have to find out every little detail there is about this event, where it's located, how many people are going to be there. You know, they even ask, you know, are there going to be children around? Because sometimes they do allow children around these events when, for instance, if there's a wedding and there's a bud bar. Things like that. So yeah, you can pretty much go anywhere, I feel like now with insurance.
Can we hear from Ali and Miranda? Can we know a little bit about the space in terms of the event industry, the space that you guys are in and your interest in cannabis?
So this is Miranda. I am co-owner and director of operations for a cannabis delivery service in Sacramento. So we service like the greater Northern California area. We've been in operation for about 2 years now. It's my fiance and I. And then kind of my interest is the next thing we were thinking about getting just specifically for California was the event license so that we could hold events here as well. And so we've been to a couple events, whether it's pop-ups or educational events. And so I just wanted to learn more about it and see if it was kind of worth the investment to do that.
Vanessa, I think you probably would be able to speak about. I totally understand. In terms of regular event insurance, I just in my profession, I obviously it's a combination of my best practice as well as what my client is interested in the nature of their event, and then I buy that insurance, as needed per event. But Vanessa, would you recommend that the event producer hold, or in Miranda's case, because she's a supplier, would you recommend holding in event insurance specifically for cannabis usage, just keeping that policy open, or kind of one-offing it? What would be your suggestion?
I personally, I would do it. I think it's more of a case by case. I would open a new one for each of the events that I've done. Simply because every event is different, and it's really hard to say how that policy is going to fluctuate depending on what's going to be happening at an event. So I wouldn't recommend just keeping it an open policy, because I feel like it gets complicated if anything or the dynamics of an event changes, and you're going to have to revisit that policy all over again the minute something changes with a new event. So my other question here that we have is, do we think that with cannabis events, we know that policies impact cannabis events. Do we think with how we build education into cannabis events, we can actually change policies themselves? Jennifer, this question is directed towards you.
I think that that can help. I know that where it's, losing my thread there. I think that the way to destigmatize and to make this something that our legislators and our licensing offices are okay with is to ramp up the education so that it's clear to people what we're trying to get across. I think that that'll make a big difference.
Yeah. Jocelyn, what about you?
I definitely think that it helps to have the education aspect, as far as, people can actually see, because some people think that cannabis is like this magical secret drug, and it's really not. It's really not, as scary as people think. So I think with education, it'll definitely be more accepted. And as far as changing policy, I think that it doesn't hurt, but I think that a lot of the policies that we would need to have changed, they vary so much. That's the other piece of cannabis, where like something that's acceptable in California could not be acceptable in Maryland or in DC. So depending on the markets and like what that state has in place, I think, starting at the state level, we could change policy through these high class. I emphasize this high class because that can change someone's perspective alone. You see someone that might be partaking in cannabis, but it doesn't look like they're in the back alley, hitting a bong. It doesn't look like how people perceive before they are educated on it. So I think it definitely helps.
And I feel like there's something to be said on how we can make the education more comprehensive for event professionals. If you look at a lot of the policies right now that hold a lot of people back in the space, it's really because they're very difficult to understand. Just like, as you mentioned, each each state is different, but then you get into each state and each city is different. Each county is different. It's so hard to keep up with what the policies are. What can you do? You know, you go into Oakland, California, and you can't have cannabis events on a private property at all. They'll shut you down. But then you go into San Francisco, directly across the Bay Bridge, and, you know, you can have businesses that allow you to have cannabis on site. You know, it's very difficult to be able to keep up with all that. So I'm wondering, like, what can we do as event professionals or even just people in the cannabis space to kind of build out a way for people to really find ways to comprehensively understand, you know, how to navigate this space if it's a necessity. Let's see, NP Good, where did she go? I actually had a question for her since she is
I'm still here.
There you are. Hi. Okay. So my question for you, actually, since you are actually already looking into, you know, doing a cannabis event with your colleague, what hiccups have you known her to already sort of face as far as building out cannabis events, or did you have any questions as far as what issues you may experience as far as working in cannabis events in the Atlanta area?
It's more about the issues where everything's very, very new. She's just having her kickoff event, I think next week, where she's kind of getting her initial membership together and there's discussing and she wants to do some educational events. So it's very, very new. And I'm on the list of one of her founding members. And I also at events and we're friends outside of everything else. So I said, oh, okay, well, I'll kind of look into kind of doing this because of everything going on too. I was like, this may be an opportunity for me to kind of pivot into a different type of event industry because I typically do like large scale live events or different things. And because of COVID, a lot of people aren't doing large scale events anymore. So, I'm just more so like curious overall. And that was great information y'all provided on food and beverage because that I don't know. And I necessarily don't want to necessarily only have smoking events or maybe, and my terminology isn't correct, but the ones where they kind of just use the vapors with oil and stuff like that. I wanted to kind of like, make it more of like Jocelyn said, more of a high-end type of experience where people can come in and maybe it's a brunch where there are a couple of items that they sample while they're at the brunch. So the sauce suggestion is great because people who don't want to partake don't have to partake, but they can, maybe if she's like selling creams or something else, people may want to use those products that they necessarily don't want to consume, like, through food and beverage.
Absolutely. And in Atlanta, do you feel like the information as far as how you can navigate the event industry with cannabis has been pretty easy to come by or find that information?
Actually, this is the first. It was so funny because she just like sent me an email last week about becoming a founding member. I said, okay, we need to start looking into everything. And then I was on the Black Professionals page on Facebook, and the thing popped up. I was like, oh, I need to go to this tonight. I was just like, because I know nothing. Like I besides me dabbling myself in different things, besides like personal experience, I have not done any research or done anything else as far as like what's allowed and what's not allowed. I know Georgia, I don't believe it's not legal in Georgia yet, but I don't know when you kind of deal with the oils and stuff and sample food, whether that's legal or not. So I need to kind of look into those things because I know you can't have probably a smoking event, but we could probably do sauces and, maybe edible, maybe, but I have to kind of see what's allowed and what's not allowed.
Absolutely.
Natasha, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Natasha. I'm in Atlanta too, so let's connect.
Yes.
Well, I'm in Marietta, so maybe we can learn together. That's always, I'm in the middle, right? Like Jocelyn, you talked a lot about, the cultural aspect, and I love those events. And Vanessa mentioned earlier that I work in inclusion and diversity. And so for me, the bridge is how do we help people who are in the cultural space make real money, right? And so how do we bridge that gap into the corporate space, into the more, elevated spaces, so you can still get that cultural vibe, but do it the right way. That's where I kind of sit in the middle. Like, I'm like, I love the vibe, but is your bank account fat? Like, how can we make that happen so that the whole experience is so memorable that, you know, people just, they want to invest in your company and they want to support what you're doing. But I understand that cultural aspect is super important, right? And so how can we keep it authentic while making sure that it's very clean and, you know, infinitely elevated? No shameless plug. Okay.
Well, I know we are getting closer to our time. So, you know, before we start bidding everybody adieu, and if anybody has anything else to say, I do want to mention that there is a company out there called, again, Love and Marriage. That's LOVE and MARIJ. They are actually working on building out a comprehensive resource for every state and every county and every city that would allow event professionals to comprehensively understand what you can do for your event, no matter where it is located. They are currently raising funds to provide this information to event professionals. They will be one of the companies that are going to be speaking at our conference coming up in July. We will also have a number of other speakers from around the world. We have a woman from Greece, we have people from Colorado, LA, that will be talking about the different localized areas or events that they've been doing in their area, and how cannabis policies have really impacted what they can do and what resources we can make available to make it easier for everyone out there. So stay tuned for that event information coming up. I would love to hand the camera over to our two producers, Sonia and Zoe, so that they can say their final adieu. And yeah, thank you guys so much for being a part of this.
We actually, there's a little cricket on here called Daryl. Who are you? That's my sister, y'all.
I think
Supporting. Thank you, baby sister. There she is. Oh, we can't hear you. You're muted. There you are.
There you go.
Oh.
I think you're
unmuted
now. There you go.
Hi.
Hi, Daryl.
Yeah. I'm doing everything as a kid myself. And like want to learn. I'm learning about the CBD lane because I am a THC girl. So it's like a lot of information, but I do have like a lot of other friends who have started businesses around CBD and like cannabis education, and I've connected my sister with some of them as well. So it's really cool to be in this space of like learning and kind of like seeing how everyone's making headway and how that we can all kind of be a product of the progression. And I think it was Jocelyn how she said it, like it's a wealthy plant. I really liked how she said that because there's so many different like uses from it. And I think that we really can, we're just like on the front part of it, you know, and seeing like what we can do like in the billion-dollar industry, not only like health-wise, but like in other areas that we can go with it. So I just think it's really cool that, you know, you guys are doing this. And I wanted to know if I could find out more about the Moms of Mary Jane, I think someone said. If that was like a group or something.
That's Jocelyn.
Yes, definitely. I can, I'll put my Instagram in the chat. But I just wanted to tell you guys too, virtual events have become a big thing due to COVID. And I think that a lot of people should, if you know, you might not have time or resources to get the permit or do whatever, but you can definitely do an event on something like this. And also if you wanted to do a larger scale conference style event where it's a little more supported and, you know, has a little bit more features to support large groups, it's a platform called Hopin. So check that out, and sky's the limit, guys.
Yay.
We're actually doing our conference on Hopin. Very excited about that. So
it's nice.
Yeah.
I like it.
I think what Ali, I know that you're listening and you're on. Ali expressed interest in all of this, so it's a good time to have us all on the same platform talking. I think, you know, for cannabis companies and Jocelyn, I don't know, who do you, and we're at the end of time, but I would love to know more, maybe on a side conversation, who do you all look to help support your events? And I think us marrying that, you know, understanding that those in the cannabis industry have support from the event industry. And like what you're doing, Natasha, is to collaborate in that space. How do we, you know, how do we provide that experience for you and bring your knowledge? And so that's why I appreciate you all for this conversation, because it's there's a lot of collaborative potential there.
And guys, if we also too, can we just, not necessarily a shameless plug, because I think it's an incredible resource for our industry, but the podcast that we launched is, you know, it's not only is it obviously dedicated to the event industry, but we're really trying to resource through this podcast, get people the resources that they need, get people questions answered, get people talking, creating the dialogue. So please share the podcast with your networks. And also just for I think I can speak for the three of us producers, however we can be of support and resource to you all in the event space or the cannabis space, please don't hesitate to reach out. You have all of our information in order to do that. So let us into your world. We want to be working together.
Absolutely. And I actually, I had a question, Jennifer. Jennifer, are you guys still taking applicants or people for your surveys for the Women in Cannabis?
Yep, it's still open.
Oh,
I would encourage everybody to take it. Yep. Yes.
Okay.
Hold on.
Yeah, if we can have that information, because I know we have a few people here. Miranda totally would love for you to hop on board that, you know, and just input your information. Jennifer, did you guys have a goal that you were trying to obtain, or is it pretty much open at this point?
You know, I was hoping to get to 1,000 in total in the U.S. That's going to be tough. I'm at 800, I believe. I am still underrepresented with young women, entry-level women. I'm still looking for women in, well, pretty much any state except for California, Oregon, and Washington, and Colorado. I'll take women anywhere. But yeah, I'd love to get to 1,000 before I turn it off.
Okay. And just to be clear, what is the women's study? What exactly is it representing for women right now? Like, what is the study supposed to be doing?
Well, the goal is to document women's experiences working in the industry. And I wanted to be able to understand their challenges and the barriers to entry, the sacrifices they make, how women deal, or, you know, their experiences with bias and sexism and discrimination, and sexual harassment. We ask questions about their cannabis use, balance and self-care, and definition of success. You know, one of the things that's really wonderful that I've learned about this women in the industry is that despite all of the barriers and challenges and sacrifices, 87% of us consider ourselves successful. And the best definition of success that anybody gave was that everyone around me eats too. And so the definitions aren't really very focused on finances or profitability. It's about growth and helping others, clients, customers, their families, their communities, stability. And it's just, I find that the women in this industry are passionate and resilient and persistent and amazing. So,
Jennifer, to that, just a question to that, what you just said. So just to be clear, this is a study for women who are working with cannabis, not necessarily women who are consuming cannabis. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. If they're working in ancillary businesses, plant touching businesses, in any part of the industry, cannabis, CBD, hemp. Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Jennifer, do you have any upcoming events? I mean, we have to not be afraid to shout ourselves out, or any activities, virtual or person?
We have not scheduled the next one yet, but my plan is to hold an event jointly with the MCBA and
What's
minorities
that?
from
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Minority Cannabis Business Association and Minorities for Medical Marijuana. And my goal is to take a deep dive into the data, talk about some of the experiences specific to Black women, and then have a panel discussion with members in both of those organizations. I'm also planning to start a live interview series with women. We've already done video recorded interviews. We're going to do live interviews with some of those women and with women who've taken the survey to share their stories and their struggles and their learnings. I have not put a date to that yet. It's going to be another month or two before we get started there.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Miranda, do you have any upcoming events, things you want to share, things you need resources or help with?
No upcoming events for us right now. We've just been looking for different things like we can partner with in the Sacramento area, most of them educational or community based, not necessarily where we're providing products, but more where we're just providing information. And so that's kind of the avenue we've been taking right now. I know that we're being part of it's a virtual Juneteenth festival. It's the 19th through the 29th, so it's completely online, and they're kind of creating like a online booth and virtual type of setup. So we will be there sharing information, but other than that, nothing, no other events coming up.
Thank you guys so much. Jennifer, again, thank you. Jocelyn, again, thank you. And we just really appreciate everything that you brought to this happy hour today. And ladies, thank you for also participating. And we hope to be able to see you again.
You've been listening to The State of Events, where event professionals connect. For more episodes, you can find us on iTunes Podcast, Spotify, and Podbean. To engage with us on social media, you can find us at _State of Events. Also, we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions, topic suggestions, or if you'd like to sponsor an upcoming episode, please send us an email to thestateofevents@gmail.com. Thanks so much for joining. Let's blossom together.